Hey guys, and welcome to Module 1 in the Inner Alchemy course, Navigating Spiritual Burnout in Your Esoteric Practice. So what I've done with this course is a little bit unique to this program. So there will be a podcast, which many of you have already seen, that's posted in the course materials every single module. And then within a week to 2 weeks after that podcast, we're going to do a lecture like this where I really unpack things a little more deeply. But I think it's useful sometimes to get some outside perspective, to get some engagement from you, the viewers. So we encourage you whenever you see that there's an Inner Alchemy podcast to participate with us. So this was a topic that so many people have asked me to do a course on, which is, how do we deal with navigating spiritual burnout in our esoteric practices? And so what I wanted to do is approach this sort of from a metaphoric perspective. So this process, as I see it, is a process of healing and empowerment. It's a process of healing what we're interpreting as burnout and empowering ourselves to recognize something underlying all of that. And so I believe, as I said on the podcast, and Dr. Terry Keranen mentioned on the podcast as well, that what we believe is burnout quite often is our intuition, our higher selves, our inner wisdom saying maybe this approach isn't where you need to be right now. And so that burnout is a warning signal, an alert that says this might not be the best way to go about what you're trying to do. And we've seen that so many times as we unpack these five parts of the burnout process and recovery from burnout. We're going to talk about some of the things that we might misinterpret along the way and how to view those from a different perspective. So what I've done is using fire as a metaphor. Since we call it burnout, why not use the metaphor fully in this particular module? And let me say before we get started that I think the reason this module is so important is that each of us at some point in time have felt a sense of burnout in our practice, a sense of sometimes that manifests as feeling like frauds or imposter syndrome. Sometimes that just feels as Megan mentioned in the podcast, like just caregiver fatigue. And so when those things arise, it can be really helpful for us to have someone to listen and someone to share their experiences as well. And I hope this starts a dialogue within the course, because in this particular course, we're going to be going really deep with how to make your practice your own. And I don't want to see anyone get to the place of burnout in their own practice. So the metaphors I used was recognizing the flames of burnout, fueling the fire, tending the embers that are left of your practice, rekindling the flame, and embracing the ashes. So let's go ahead and dive in. So when we talk about recognizing the flames for spiritual director or practitioners, and so I also just want to preface this by saying I tried to look at this from the four major categories of esoteric practitioners that are out there. There are the spiritual practitioners, those who, which includes all of us, those who are practicing the esoteric traditions of our ancestors. Some are practicing esoteric traditions of the 20th century. Some are practicing esoteric traditions from other cultures that have welcomed us in and given us a home spiritually. Then there are teachers, and that would include those who both do what I'm doing and what Megan does, and Dominic and Michael and Andrea and Alyssa, what we do in the school to try and bring information to you. But it also includes you, as for many of you who have kids at home or who have younger siblings that you're trying to share your family traditions with. And it also finally kind of includes, I'm not really sure whether we want to put this in teachers or in authors or in leaders, but it also includes those who have spiritual practices as a business. So if you're a card reader, if you're an astrologer, if you're a divinator of another sort, if you are a minister in an esoteric tradition, then you're a leader, but you're also a teacher. And then, finally, then there's authors and then thought leaders, just people who are personalities, whether it's on social media or on the lecture circuit, the workshop circuit. So that leaders falls on into the category of everyone else who talks publicly about spiritual things, esoteric things. So for spiritual practitioners, recognizing the flames, maybe you start to notice that there's a sense of decline in your connection to the source of your power. Maybe you're just feeling cynical about the way that the spiritual teachings that have been handed down to you or that you've picked up along the way, whether they really work, imposter syndrome, or difficulty maintaining your own personal spiritual practices, just always finding something else that you could be doing at that time. For teachers, there's a sense, I think, a lot of times of feeling detached from students, a loss of passion for teaching, feeling like people just aren't paying attention, and really being exhausted when you start to think about what am I going to teach for my next class. And that might also include cynicism toward the platform or the school or the means, the mode through which you're doing your teaching. So that's the flames, excuse me, that we often call spiritual burnout. And then for authors, it's simple. It's writer's block and difficulty connecting with their audience. It might be a lack of inspiration or a sense of disillusionment that arises, and you just say, this is just not. People aren't buying my books. People aren't reading my stories. Blah 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 blah. And that cycle, you could see how that not only becomes recognition, but as we're going to talk in the next slide, becomes part of the fuel for that experience. And then finally, we have leaders. So maybe you're struggling with making decisions. You're irritable with your fellow practitioners, or you just feel cut off from your fellow practitioners, and are beginning to wonder if you're really a leader at all. These are all part of the process of recognizing the flames. So when we move on to the next step, fueling the fire, for spiritual practitioners, that's like, constant demand for emotional availability makes you just feel this sense of being drained, this sense of not being compensated well for the amount of energy you're bringing to the table. Maybe it's just the doubt itself, and starts to feel like exhaustion every time somebody asks you, "Can you tell me what's going on with my relationship?" When you know that there are far more pressing questions people could be asking. And particularly when you see, that these people should be asking different questions because the rest of their life is a mess. Maybe there's a bit of stress at feeling like you have to maintain a perfect spiritual image that fuels the fire of feeling burned out. That can be an exhausting experience of feeling like you have to always be on. So many of those, and this overlaps with authors, so many of those that are authors or teachers or spiritual practitioners feel like they have to be careful what they say because they don't want to lose a customer. They don't want to lose a reader. They don't want to lose the recognition that they get from their platform or from their publishing house. And so they find that they're constantly editing what they're saying. And that results in feeling like an imposter, feeling like the authenticity is no longer there. Again, like I said, for teachers, maybe just the demands of the particular courses that you're teaching are too much for you. Maybe you overextended yourself. Sometimes really big classes can be draining if you don't have the kind of support from a team of practitioners and teachers and administrators to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And like I said, for authors, we don't get paid very much for writing our books. It's a very rare and very small exclusive group of authors who make enough money to make a living on writing books. That's not why we write books. We write books to share information on a broader and wider scale. And maybe it's the feedback from the trolls and the critics that gets you to start to feel burned out. And leaders, there can be tremendous pressure from stakeholders that you have to perform at a higher level, that you have to bring more students, that you have to bring sell more lecture tickets. So that results in longer hours, difficult decisions, sometimes decisions that make you question your ethics. And so burnout is a natural response that feels safer than saying, am I about to compromise my ethics? It's easier to just say I'm burned out, I can't do it, than to make that difficult decision. So what do we do when we tend the embers that what's left when we just think that everything is gone? Well, for spiritual practitioners, when we look at our spiritual practice, we look at the embers that flicker after that feeling of burnout. We realize we have to set boundaries. We realize that we need to prioritize our own spiritual practice first. And that means getting out and engaging in nature, grounding ourselves, working with the ancestors and your spiritual allies, and then seeking support. After doing all of the other things, then you seek support from fellow practitioners, if necessary, from a therapist or a counselor. But the most important thing is when you're in that feeling of feeling burnout, just pull away, take a break, and focus on your practice. Focus on why you do what you do. We talked about that in the previous courses, that if you have a big enough why, the how is so much easier. For teachers, it's also a matter of setting boundaries with your students, setting boundaries with other faculty members, with administrators, taking breaks to recharge, and then finding creative outlets to reconnect with those who are doing the same kind of work you're doing. Not necessarily just talking to teachers in your educational platform or your school or your another, component workshops or something like that, but connecting with them in a social setting, maybe sitting down and having a glass of wine or a cup of tea and relaxing so that you can laugh about the things that mutually stress everyone out. And I find that it's really important not just to create a supportive network of fellow practitioners in the aspect of, like, let's say you're a teacher, fellow teachers, but maybe some authors and maybe some card readers and maybe some gift shop owners or esoteric store owners that you can all get together. And then when people start telling stories and you start laughing and you start sometimes crying, you realize you're not alone. And you realize that through this process, that it is a process, that it's a journey, and that the journey is really the most magical and important part. And that sometimes the journey is taking us someplace we didn't expect, and we learn to trust the process. So for authors, prioritizing your mental health, authors should always, I think, have a therapist. Set realistic goals. If your publisher is telling you got to get the book done in a month and it's going to take you 3, then it's so much easier and less stressful to say, I can't do that in a month. I can do it in 3 months. And 90% of the time, they're going to be willing to listen. You may have to negotiate it, maybe 2.5 months. But you're not setting yourself up for the emotional baggage of feeling like, oh, now I gotta, focus on churning a book out, which is never going to be as good as if you did it naturally. Churning that book out, your spiritual practice is going to fail. It's going to suffer. Your relationships are going to suffer. You're going to feel more isolated. because you're creating circumstances that lead to those experiences. So it's not that you're burning out, it's that you're not, there are no boundaries. And there's only so much of you in any one moment to be able to give to whatever those demands are, whatever those projects are, whatever that passion is. And like I said, for authors, flexible schedule and realistic, writing goals. For leaders, delegate some of the tasks that have to take place in order for you to be an effective leader, in order for you to be an effective workshop presenter, or whatever it is that you're doing. Take those times away so that you can actually tend to the embers. So if you're a esoteric personal development lecturer, then you need to take some time away so that you can engage the practices that you teach. And that in and of itself can be life-changing. And so what we do in order to, for all of us, in order to be able to rekindle the flame of our practice is first, we have to invest in resources. Now, sometimes that's financial, and it means, seeking out mental health services, or taking a course for ourselves, feeding us. Sometimes it's just a matter of reaching out to our community, to fellow practitioners, to people that can listen to us without judgment, create a safe space for us to express what we're going through, and then foster collaboration. Say, you know what, carrying this load by myself is a lot, but if I can share that load, and I'll give you a fantastic, example. The Inner Alchemy series, the Inner Alchemy podcast, is my number one passion. And it's something I've wanted to do in a particular way for a number of years. But I knew that in order to grow my audience, I also had to introduce people to other practitioners, and I had to find a way for other practitioners to be promoting me as well as I promote them. Now, I got really burned out at one point because I felt like I was having all these authors on, we were doing all these interviews, and they were not talking about us to their viewers. But as time went on, I started to realize the what I was calling burnout was because I was interviewing the people that were outside my path. And so, of course, they weren't going to promote what I was doing because their path was completely different. It was a neo-pagan path. And so in order to be able to do that in a way that was more authentic and that was more natural, more organic, I teamed up with Michael Tadez McQueen, and we created a new version of The View. And that went through several cycles of being recreated. We had the Masca and the Mystic broadcast with Andrea. We had a season of The Brew where there were three practitioners on every week. And now we've created this roundtable discussion that really feels much more authentic, much more natural, and brings in broader perspectives from different traditions. So invest in those resources, foster the collaboration, create communities of support where practitioners can share their experiences. I hoped that would happen more and more in the Inner Alchemy platform itself, and that's why I spent so much time and effort and resources in building it, because I wanted other people to have that support as well on their journeys. And then promote boundaries and self-care. Encourage a healthy work-life balance, not just for yourself, but for the people that you're collaborating with. When you create a healthier environment around you, you're creating a healthier environment within you as well. And so that makes it a safe space. That makes it a place where you can say, hey, this is a place where we honor and recognize the need to disconnect, the need to reassess what we're doing, to course correct. Because it doesn't matter, you've heard me say before, my mentor told me, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. If you're pointed in the wrong direction, you're never going to get to where you're going. So why not take that break and check, make sure that you are going in the right direction? And then we also have to embrace the ashes. We have to assess our priorities. Burnout can be an opportunity for us to say, does this really matter? Is this bringing me joy? And if not, to course correct, to point in a different direction. And in order to do that effectively, you have to be able to say, I need to take a break and step back for a few. And I'll tell you, it's not always easy. It was very difficult for me, for example, with our platform when you're teaching 2 or 3 courses a week to be able to take some time off. But we knew we had to do it. And initially, it was just a couple of weeks in the summer when everyone was on vacation, and we would do it. But then I realized that so many of the other educators were able to take a couple weeks off. And what I was doing in that couple weeks off was planning for the next semester, and that was burning me out. That was making me feel ill at ease. And when I feel ill at ease, it means that I'm either focused on something of a make-believe past, a past based on my perceptions, or I was projecting what I thought might go wrong in the future. So what we do to develop resilience is to increase our self-awareness, to recognize, is this really burnout? Or is intuition telling me that we need to tweak what we're doing? Sometimes it doesn't mean going in a different direction, but it means just course correcting enough to be in alignment with our values and our objectives, and recognizing that we all have personal limitations to what we can and can't do and what we want to do. This is a key. Make sure that what you're doing in your spiritual practice, whether you're a teacher, whether you're just a practitioner, whether you're a service provider, an author, or a thought leader, make sure what you're doing brings you joy. We're not all meant to be teachers. We're not all meant to be authors. You don't have to jump on a bandwagon and tell yourself that it's the only way to success, because you have everything you need right now to be successful as a practitioner. And that's the foundation of all of the other things. All of the other things we talk about, being a teacher, being an author, being a thought leader, those are all expressions of our passion. And our spiritual passion has to be rooted in our practice, has to be rooted in venerating our ancestors, reconnecting with nature, working with our spiritual allies, and finding out what the best expression of our magic is in the world all around us. And that can, sometimes in and of itself be the catalyst for change that we're looking for. And there's nothing to feel bad about saying, hey, I just want to explore a new career path or a new spiritual path or a new way of looking at things. But what you don't want to do, the signs, the alerts that we often miss, is when we're jumping around from thing to thing to thing to thing, spiritual tradition to spiritual tradition to spiritual tradition, all of these different spiritual traditions, because we can't find some place that really feels at home. But we don't often tell ourselves, I tried this path and it wasn't for me. Tibetan Buddhism, beautiful tradition. I spent years in a monastery enjoying the teaching, but recognized that it was the wisdom that attracted me, that it was the foundational principles that attracted me, and I could take those with me and not be a Tibetan Buddhist. And that was a tough one for me to swallow, because I was getting lots of acclaim, lots of applause for the work that I was doing as a Tibetan teacher. But I was at an ashram that I didn't want to be at, teaching people that I didn't want to teach, and people who weren't really my people, because there was a cultural difference in our approach that wasn't synergistic. They were fantastic people, beautiful people, loving people. I really do still to this day appreciate and love most of them. but they weren't my people. And so I had to be willing to take some time away and to explore new paths and find the way to express my magic better. So let's end today's class by using the formula for a spell and working on that experience that sometimes presents itself as spiritual burnout. And let's transform that right here and right now. So feel free to keep your eyes open, to close your eyes, to light a candle. If you need to pause the video so that you can light a candle and some incense, fantastic. Go ahead and pause the video now. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to start by recognizing that there is one infinite source that permeates everything, one force that encompasses all of the cosmos, one energy from which all things are made. We recognize that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, and therefore this source is eternal. It's creative intelligence. It's the ground of our being. And so we stand before the cosmos affirming that I am one with that source. Its power is my power. And I'm attuned to that home frequency, that frequency of source, which some call the quantum field, some call God, some call love. And as the creator of my reality, I now affirm that ease and comfort and peace and joy are the natural expressions of my home frequency. I am love. I am peace. I am joy. I am forgiveness, and I am justice. Right here, right now, I accept that I'm rekindling the fires of my power. I'm reclaiming the winds that feed them, protected by the waters of the mothers, and I reclaim my unity with the ground of being. I'm grateful for this realization. I feel the enthusiasm, the clarity, and the empowerment surge to me, through me, and all around me, and extend to those whose lives I touch and return to me multiplied. And so I release this working, this spell, to do its good and perfect work and return to me multiplied. And so it is. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope that that you've been able to take something away from this. Take an opportunity to take a few days off. And I encourage you, if you have any aha moments as you take those few days off from your practice, to look at what it is that you're doing. To if it's time to course correct and you feel something you want to share with the group, please do that in the comments in this under this module, because it will make a big difference. Actually, it won't be under the comments in this module. It'll be either under the comments in YouTube that you could do that, or in the class chat. So I really encourage you to take that time to make a decision, because what I've had an opportunity to see with so many of you is people came to the course saying, you know, I just want to understand the secular aspect of our tradition, or I just want to understand the religious aspect of our tradition, or I just want to understand how to reconnect with my ancestors. And then there was a resistance to what we perceived as the other. So folks like me who are non-theistic, who don't use the expression God to express source, often say, I don't want to hear about the religious stories. I really don't care about the gods and goddesses. And I wasn't really crazy about having to teach about the gods and goddesses outside of an academic way, because I wanted people to understand you don't have to embrace a religion to have a spiritual path. And so I had to do my work to say, you know what, some of the people that are coming here are looking for that connection to spirituality. They're looking for that connection, the intersectionality between religion and esotericism, and they need to know that that's all right. that they don't have to throw out their statues and mortis and photos of the deities that are their spiritual allies. In fact, they need to embrace those and recognize that because of essential unity, because you and I are one with all that ever has been and all that will ever be, that those deities, those mortis, those spiritual allies are a part of us. We're one with them. And so we shouldn't push them away. We should bring them in and collaborate. So I hope this has inspired you. I look forward to hearing some of your takeaways and how that's helped you. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next module. Thanks, everybody. Take care.